Now, throughout its history, the U.S. has seen several prominent families repeatedly produce notable politicians from their ranks. You have the Kennedys, the Roosevelts, the Tafts, even the Clintons. But many would argue that no political dynasty has been as prominent and as influential as the Bushes, just like Manny just told us. Now, joining us now to discuss the Bush dynasty is Russ Baker. Baker is an investigative journalist and author of the book Family of Secrets, The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government, and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years. Welcome, Russ. Thank you for being here. And I have to say, in preparation for this interview, I started reading some of your work, and riveting, really good stuff. I mean, I love it, so kudos to you. But I want to start off by asking you about the Bush dynasty and this election. Now, George P. Bush is expected to easily defeat John Cook in the race for Texas Land Commissioner. And now, George P., he's the son of former Florida governor and the grandson and nephew of two former presidents. So how has the Bush family managed to produce so much political might?
If you go all the way back, you'll find that for many generations, the Bush family has played a special role in political society, often fronting for the interests of wealthier, fundamentally more powerful people who preferred to stay in the background. And so we see now Jeb Bush and then his son and George W. and then George H.W. before him, and before him Senator Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush's father was in charge of small weapons procurement for the United States in World War I. So this is a family that's been on the scene for a very, very long time. They're absolutely brilliant at this, and they put major resources into making sure that they can continue to do this, and I think we're going to see them around for a very, very long time.
You know, Russ, it's such an interesting moment in American history because we have, if you go back to 1980, we were just talking about this. Go back to 1980, and since that time, we have not had more than 4 years where either a Bush or a Clinton was not at least a high-ranking member of an administration.
Well, 8 years with Obama.
Well, but we have a Secretary of State in Hillary Clinton.
There you go. So just high ranking. Right? It's incredible.
So if you take that into account, going into 2016, it's very possible we could see a Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush race. The hashtag tonight, not just two parties. At what point do the American people say, this is insane?
Not just two families.
Right. Do you think the American people are getting sick of it, or is there enough time going by that they start to actually inherit this?
Well, the political dialogue in this country has been so degraded that I think many of us have retreated to viewing it simply as entertainment. And with the tremendous interest in celebrities and gossip and what have you, it's very easy to see politics as nothing more than that. Which face do we like? Which face do we want to see on our televisions for the next 4 years? And we do like to go up and back between them. I think this is very, very real. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in 2020 we see President Jeb Bush running for re-election, and in Texas, a governor by the name of George P. Bush.
Now, Russ, you know, George P. Bush, he's fluent in Spanish, and he's made reaching out to, you know, Republicans and Latinos this top priority of his. And immigration, it's certainly a hot issue. We've just talking about it before. But do you think this has been a prudent move, and will it produce results, more importantly?
I think it was a prudent move. I credit a lot of this to George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, who I think was quite masterful at identifying opportunities. The family has spread itself all over the country, and they've got cousins and others who may also be running for office, and they correctly identify opportunities. They rarely come out on the extreme conservative end of things, and whenever they see an opportunity, in this case, apparently Barbara was originally not too happy about the marriage to a Mexican, but I think now they're all counting their lucky stars because this has worked very, very well for them.
Well, just playing off what you're talking about there, Russ, interestingly, Jeb Bush right now, as you said, kind of ahead of the curve in terms of the Republican Party. I think he got some criticism from Republicans. What was it? He referred to illegal immigration, excuse me, as an act of love. People coming here as an act of love for their families. He got a lot of flack from the Republican Party over that, but at the same time, he's certainly ahead of the curve in terms of trying to court that vote ahead of 2016, is he not?
That's right, and I think that the Bush game is always to try to occupy a portion of the conservative sector. It'll be a little tricky, though. With George W. Bush, he brilliantly played up the so-called born-again angle, and that really was what got him the conservative votes. We have to keep in mind the Bushes are fundamentally what you would consider to be moderate Republicans, and they're playing a long game. They're generally looking at the general election, and so they've got to be just conservative enough while also establishing those kinds of credentials they want to bring in November.
Now, Russ, many children of successful people, regardless to what industry their parents found success in, they tend to gravitate towards those industries. They're familiar with them, they know what's going on, and, you know, many would argue that that's just not a bad thing. But is that the truth when it comes to politics? Should you try something outside of what your family has done?
Well, I mean, the Bush family, they certainly do go into various forms of businesses, but what we see is a lot of business opportunities coming their way from people who support the family politically. You know, it might be nice, of course, to have people running for office who've actually been out there in the real world, but I just think that's increasingly a rarity.
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, as you're discussing this, the idea that George W. Bush really played up this evangelical connection, and brilliantly so. He did so in his first term. A lot of folks won't remember, but in 2004, you know, Karl Rove and George Bush played this game of trying to get the constitutional amendment on marriage passed. Evangelicals flocked to it. He got reelected and then never ever mentioned it again. He was really done with it the day after his election. At what point does the American public start to see this family as kind of a group of actors in many ways? Or do they feel nostalgic in some ways about the Bush era at this point, as hard as that it might be to believe?
Well, you make a very good point. I spent 5 years researching the Bush family for my book and was astonished at what I learned and how much was not known about them, and how so many of these things that we think about them, for example, the born-again moment, and many of the others were actually carefully constructed fabrications, had little a basis in truth. And in fact, on the born-again issue, in Family of Secrets, I actually interviewed their advisor who crafted this whole plan to cast him that way. I saw memos and so forth. It's cynical, but it works. And sadly, the media in this country is so deficient that it prefers not to delve and not to ask too many questions about who these people really are. Who really is it that we're electing to lead the country?
Now, in your book, you've written that, quote, Bush 41's career in oil politics and diplomacy provided cover for her secret life as a clandestine intelligence operative involved with highly sensitive operations, many of them domestic. I mean, that sounds like a fantastic plot for a Hollywood screenplay. Like, this just doesn't sound real. But can you tell us what you know about Herbert Walker that he was able to conceal from the public for so many years?
Yes, well, first of all, one of the things that interested me was when I began to try to figure out how somebody as improbable as George W. Bush could become president of the United States. I think a surprising event in and of itself. I began to look more at the father, who himself was an improbable president, not a particularly articulate or visionary individual. And then as I looked back at him, I thought, well, why was he named CIA director in 1976? And why, if he only served for 1 year, was the CIA headquarters named after him, of all people? The more I dug into him, the more I found out that he actually had unknown and unnamed credentials for that position, namely that he had been a long-time Central Intelligence Agency operative undercover while serving in all these other positions. And this goes all the way back.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Russ. That's incredible, but I have one final question. We have 10 seconds for an answer. You know, your book makes some pretty incredible claims, but I'm just going to ask you point blank, did Poppy kill Kennedy? Got to ask you.
You got to buy the book, right?
Well, I've got about 5 chapters in there on that.
Okay, so buy the book. I like it. Good answer. Well played. Good politicking.
All right, Russ, thank you so much.